Mami, ¿por qué no hay comida en la nevera? Mami, ¿por qué me llaman jíbara? Mami, ¿por qué vivimos y dormimos en el piso? Those were the questions that I was asking myself to my mom when I came from Puerto Rico, when we didn't have enough to eat, I was called a country girl because I didn't speak English, and when many times we were sleeping on the floor because we were living with someone, another family member that had 7 members of his family in a 2-bedroom apartment. That was my story. And I never ever looked back to feel shameless about that, but if anything, to make social change so the families that come before me and after me would not go through the experience. At La Colaborativa, we're that community group that enhances the quality and empowers the economic health of our community. And we do that through community organizing, social policy, and mobilizing, and making sure that we question authority. I began at La Colaborativa at the age of 22. I never cared about mobilizing people, questioning authority, never cared about being arrested 3 times for social justice issues, never cared about making sure that people's voices were heard. And when we were not invited as they were making decisions on our behalf, on behalf of females of color, on behalf of community members that were very low income, Latino immigrants, the vast majority, we would bring that chair or we would knock on the door and they would say that this is a private meeting. Well, it's not private if you're talking about Latinos. So I'm going to sit here. Fine, you don't want me to speak, but I'm sitting here. And I would sit there and I would bring others. And through all that work, we began to make history. But I got to tell you, history is not easy when you look like me. History is not easy when you have an accent. History is not easy when you question authority. When you lead without a notebook, because your story is different than many other people's story. And when your story is the struggle of closing the door, at times being very strong in the street, but closing the door to a reality that I have a woman that raised me with so much love and passion, but she has a substance abuse issue. My mom had a substance abuse issue. My brother was a cocaine addict, and I never let that bother us. I never let that sort of like guide my future. I did everything at La Colaborativa with the mission of knowing that there's 2,000, 3,000 other Gladys Vega in the community that I needed to transform their lives. And through the history of La Colaborativa, we created stability opportunities. We address systematic barriers like you cannot imagine. For me, there's no an excuse for you not to make it. For me, La Colaborativa brings up around change and making sure that right now, after a global pandemic, we're about making people get their skills set, making sure that they create co-ops, that we give them the skills that they need necessary in order for them to make it. I don't need a family, an adult in that family to work 3 jobs in order for them to make it. Imagine if we give them the training, the skills, the ESL classes, the citizenship, everything they need in order for them to make it. They would not need to work 3 jobs to have a decent salary. It's about us individually providing and giving the help in here in order for people to make it. Listen, I had that opportunity through my church, through the people that care about me, through the family members that supported me in my journey, and it worked, and that's what I do at La Colaborativa. In La Colaborativa, we're about social change no matter who you are. We provide jobs to young people that were in the street, gang members that people didn't believe in, and now they're police officers. Many of our youth right now, they work at the fire department, they're in the carpentry program. We make things happen because we don't have a choice, because we cannot feel petty for the conditions that we're given. We need to transform those conditions into action and make sure that everything that we do with the lenses of love and empowering those individuals that have to be empowered. And we do it without judgment. We know that they can make it, that they have the skills to make it. La Colaborativa is a wraparound services. Imagine you go to La Colaborativa and you provide services from not knowing where to go for food to like citizenship classes to computer classes. This is us, like in Chelsea, Massachusetts. We began many years, 35 years ago, doing organizing. This is me doing organizing in La Colaborativa, making sure that we were present, making sure that we participated. We created organizations. We brought about social change. But we did it with the lenses of caring, unconditional love, and making sure that we question authority. We were not going to stand by and feel that if we didn't act on a policy or a decision making, that we were going to be comfortable about it. You know, we were those individuals that when the Catholic Campaign for Human Development gave us $260,000 for 6 years for us to be able to provide services, they wanted us to be able to work with Latino immigrants, but those Latino immigrants, they cannot be LGBTQ. If they were workers, they couldn't. And what I did when the first year, I didn't know. There were 3 things that they told me not to do. Provide support for abortion, euthanasia, or death penalty. And then they tell me that after the first year that the workers that I was defending couldn't be gay. So what I did, I took their check that I spent, the $40,000 first, and then the $60,000 that they gave me, wrote another check, gave it back to them, and said, I'm not going to oppress a group of individuals while I'm working with another group. So I gave the money back. I was that. And I tell you, I never look back on that decision. It was the best thing ever. Because when we provide services, we provide them with values, dignity, and we don't take a look back at all. Another thing that it was very instrumental that we did was the transgender bill. The transgender bill, a woman gets, it's in a dance club. The guy noticed that she was a trans. He decides to follow her, beats her up. The Mass Equality was working on a bill for transgender rights. They had no transgender right. So I organized Eugene O'Flaherty, our judiciary rep, and I basically called them to meet with a group of constituents. He couldn't believe that I had over 20 transgender females. This is an Irish guy who believes only on female and male as a couple. That's all he believed back then. And I had 20 transgender females telling the story what it was to sleep and to be under that skin. And you know what? That year we passed the transgender bill. And we stood strong, and we continue to fight for policies. And when I tell you, like, not to be comfortable where you're sitting, it's because there's still, in Massachusetts, there remains a lot of injustice. I think throughout the pandemic, look, I was finally seen. I tell my daughter, who's here, who's a city council member, I tell her all the time, I'm gonna write a book about being seen. As a female of color, all this work that I have done in 35 years with many members and many people was not viewed as much because we were not seen. It took a pandemic for us to be in the front lines of the newspaper for the work that we were doing. We, La Colaborativa, and the Chelsea community, we were the epicenter of the pandemic. We were #1 in the United States with the most cases. And then we became #1 in the most vaccinations. So we got everyone vaccinated. We changed our trajectory, and we changed it because while people were home being afraid of the pandemic, we went door knocking with doctors because people didn't believe in vaccinations. They thought that something was going to happen to them. So we took doctors, we door knocked, and we made those changes in order for them to be vaccinated and for them to continue to follow the trajectory of vaccination, medical condition. My ideal situation right at this moment is that we prevent sort of like healthcare, that people don't have to go to the hospital because we're addressing the social determinants of health. We're giving people housing. We're working with legalization in terms for them not to worry. We're addressing social mental health. We are addressing the issues of having economic sustainability. We believe that a better Massachusetts can only be done if we all work together, but if we forget about the myths. I think the most beautiful thing that happened to me during the pandemic was that people saw our community and they didn't see a low-income community of immigrants. They saw a community of human beings. And until we stop thinking and giving labels to people, we will not stop. And I wanted to show you our history because our history, once again, for many, many years, we've been doing this work, and it was ignored because literally in communities of color, community that brings labels, that you are raised with a label, you are conditioned not to succeed. And we made it because we removed those labels, we got to work, and we make sure that people were present, that they were hearing us, and if they were not hearing us and they were not coming to our rescue, I went to the media. I would call the Boston Globe, I would call the Channel 5, I would call Jorge Quiroga, who was retired from Channel 5, and say, hey, get me Channel 5 to cover Chelsea. Look, people are dying and we're not getting support. And this is what made it for Chelsea. But think about every community you live in, who is not at the table and why are not at the table, and what you can do to make a difference. We sit always very comfortable where we are. And believe me, if I wouldn't have done with our staff in the pandemic what we did, we wouldn't have been here. We wouldn't be talking about the vast majority of our residents being vaccinated, the vast majority of our residents now being present and making sure that we take care of our mental health issues, that we take care of our housing situation, that we care about each other, that we check on our neighbors. The pandemic's over, but we haven't stopped. We continue to vaccinate, we continue to go door knocking, we continue to provide jobs, economic sustainability. We just built a 30,000 square feet of a building to make sure that we provide economic sustainability to every resident, regardless where they come from. Whether they're Latino, non-Latino, we don't care. We want to make sure that every immigrant in Massachusetts has a place in this community where they feel welcome, that they don't have to question their mom for not having enough food, for sleeping on the floor. We want to make sure that we make a difference, because by making a difference, we're caring about an individual, even if we don't know who they are. Muchísimas gracias. Yo soy Gladys Vega. Gracias.